The most important conclusion I derive from this story is to subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories in the future. Let me know what you thought about the author in the comments. Was his revenge too weak or too brutal? I know you might probably want to judge me as you get to the end of this story, but first of all, I need you to know that I take responsibility for what happened, and if my wife had not done what she did, then maybe things would have turned out differently for us. My name is Adam, 32 male, and my ex-wife and I had been married for 2 years before we went our separate way. I met Megan when I was transferred from my former place of work to a different country, and on the very first day arriving at the country, I went to drink with a colleague of mine who wanted to show me around town, and that's how I met Megan. After listening to her for what seemed like an hour, she asked me about myself, and I told her I had just been transferred by my company to her country, and for some reason, something piqued her interest in me, and that's how our friendship began. To be honest, if Megan and I ended up as just friends, it would have still been a great experience for me, and I would not have gotten hurt and betrayed like the way I did. On getting to know each other better, I found out that she worked as a caregiver, and slowly, she told me things about herself, things like her believing that she would be a spider farmer, and she would own a big spider farmer, and she would own a big spider farm when she got older, so much for having childhood dreams. This was to show you how funny Megan could be at times. Honestly, I'd love to say that in all my years of interacting and having a few girlfriends, Megan was one of the most transparent girls I had met. She just had a way of making you see through her, and after I met her family, I finally understood where she got it from. Not just that, she was very kind and treated everyone around her like a fellow human being, irrespective of their social status. She loved and treated her friends and family the same way, and she barely spoke ill about anyone, and I think her personality played a major role in making her a great caregiver. Aside from treating the people close to her nicely, Megan also treated strangers well, and it was one of the things I loved about her on the first night we met. One time, we went out at night for a walk, and after walking for a while, we decided to go into a nearby small store to grab some orange juice, and after we grabbed everything we wanted, and while we were wait for the sales attendants to finish with the first customers and attend to us, an old beggar man came in and asked the sales attendant if she could give him a bottle of water and that he had no money to pay for it. Personally, I think the sales attendant could have simply said no, and she didn't want to. Instead, she yelled at the man, left the counter, and tried to throw him out of the store. It was just a sad and terrible sight to witness. I wasn't expecting Megan to flip or say anything, but she did, and she yelled at the sales attendants for treating an elderly man that way. Then she went ahead to pay for a bottle of water for him. When I asked her why she acted that way, she said the man reminded her of the man she was looking after, and I felt it was really human of her to do that, coupled with the fact that the man looked weak, tired, and very homeless. Before we left the store that night, we heard people murmuring that Megan did what she did for the accolades, or so they could see her as nice person. But that was not true. That was her true personality, and although the both of us are no longer together, I know for sure that Megan was just being her true self that night. The thing was, it ran through her family. The first day, Megan invited me to have dinner at her place. I was stunned by their love and act of kindness. If I didn't know better, I would have said there were those rare set of humans whom the world did not know existed. And this was because as they made me feel like I was a part of their family. Her stepfather, Bob, was so warm and receptive, and Megan's mother, Lily, loved me so much that I wished her I was her biological son. Megan's stepbrother, Max, on the other hand, was great, and because of them, it felt like I had been living in the country for a very long time, and it didn't feel like I was a stranger to them. After a year of knowing Megan and her family, I realized that I had fallen deeply in love with her, and I could not think of any other woman aside from her. She had taken a part of my heart, and the only thing I looked forward to was living happily with her forever and her family. When I told Megan about my feelings for her, It was easy for us to start dating because she felt the same way for me too, and she knew that I did. Things became easier for us. I was already working with one of the top organizations in her state, so money was not an issue for me. In less than 5 months, we planned our wedding, and when it was time, my family members and friends came over, and we had a beautiful party. To think that I didn't even want the transfer when I was notified about it, but I ended up getting married to Megan and meeting her amazing family. After our wedding, we started living together and doing things like a couple. I don't still get why she ruined everything, but our marriage was beautiful, and the memories I had with her are still locked up in my head. We didn't have a child immediately, because Megan and I were not ready yet. She wanted us to spend time with each other, enjoy as couples, and live our lives to the fullest. She was just ready for her body to change, having those morning sickness, the weird cravings and everything else that came with pregnancy, and I respected that. I really loved Megan because she was the kind of woman who supported her man, and she was just like her mother. She understood my job, and she was ready to move with me whenever my company transferred me, and luckily for me, I could apply to remain in her country, because for our marriage, and when I was due, I tried to apply for her country to become my permanent workplace, and it was approved, so we didn't have to worry about traveling or not traveling anymore. Part of the reason I did that was because I enjoyed being around Megan's family, more than being with my family or other people. I cannot just explain how they made me feel, and that was something I never felt as a child, or with my family members, so I was ready to do whatever I had to preserve it. After our marriage, Max, Megan's brother, was a regular visit to our home, and I didn't have an issue with that, because he was like a younger brother to me, and from the way he was close to Megan, I could tell that he loved his sister so much, and he visited frequently because he missed her. Aside from that, I loved hanging out with Max and drinking with him. On some nights, he would sleep over at our house after we had too much to drink. Most times, Max and I would even turn our heavy might drinking into a competition, and the one who drank it all without being wasted would take all of the money. This was a very fun activity, and Megan would even join us on the nights whenever she was in the mood. Sadly, 2 years after we got married, Megan lost her stepfather, and she was in so much pain. It wasn't just her whole family was grieving, and it really hit her mother the most because she loved Bob so much. I must admit, I missed Bob too, his hearty laughters, dinner jokes, his usual story of the World War that his grandparents told him, and his terrible singing. I could only imagine what Megan, her mother and Max were going through. To be honest, her father's death affected her a lot, that she even had to stop working in order to grieve properly, and all through this while I supported her. I supported them throughout the process of preparing for her father's burial until he was buried. After the burial, I expected Megan to go back to her usual self, but she didn't. Instead, her health deteriorated until she became a thing of concern for all us. She had known Bob since she was 13, and that was after her biological father died. Bob stepped in and took up the role of a father in her life again, so I could only imagine what it felt like for her to lose a father twice. I tried my best to cheer her up, but no matter how much I tried, it just wasn't working. I didn't know so much about Bob, so whenever she brought up conversations about him, I didn't have much to say. But I noticed that whenever Max came over and they shared memories of Bob that I never heard of, she would laugh, and for the whole day her mood would get better, but the moment Max left, she'd go back into her shell. And because I was so concerned about her, I asked Max to move in and stay with us until she got better. When I did this, I did it because I wanted Megan to get better and gradually crack out of her shell, and though the incident that followed after this still hurts me a lot, but I'm glad that I made this decision. If not, maybe I would still be living with a cheat thinking that she loved only me. After Max moved into our apartment, Megan's health improved, and she began to get better like I expected. Originally, I intended for Max to stay with us for a couple of weeks, but he ended up staying for 2 months with us. Like I said, Megan slowly began to improve. She became more active and more alive. She no longer stayed in our room all day like she used to, crying her eyes out. I loved the improvement I was seeing, and it made me very happy to know that her step-brother's presence had an effect on her. Max handled his grief well, so he wasn't really a concern to me, and in no time, we weren't back to the games we used to play, and our drinking competition returned. One night, Max and I were just doing our thing, and Megan decided to join us. I already took a few bottles, but because I saw how excited she was to be a part of the game, I lallowed her to compete with her brother, Max. And when I was tired of watching them drink and laugh with no one winning, I excused myself and went to bed because I didn't want to stay past my bedtime, and more reason being that I had to be at the office by 8 am the next day. I knew Megan was in good hands, so I went to bed with my mind at rest. She sat there at the bar, drinking all alone, and somehow we began to talk to each other. You know, the whole thing where strangers meet each other at a bar for the first time, and they begin to share things about themselves. That's how Megan and I met. That day, she had a bad day at work, and she couldn't help but share it to me and Jude. Maybe if she knew what fate had in store for the both of us, at least the good part of the memories we shared together, I don't think she would have shared so much about herself that night. When I look back on my high school days, which was about 5 years ago, I recall a story about a good friend of mine and teammate, whom we'll call Stan, and his girlfriend, whom we'll refer to as Liz. It was during our junior year when they were together, and to be honest, Liz wasn't very popular among our team. She had this self-centered attitude and always seemed to crave attention. I remember her being that girl in class who was loud and would always try to be the center of attention. Liz was also known to be one of the most attractive girls in our class, and she was well aware of it. It's clear that Liz wanted to be popular, and she believed that dating our top wrestler football player would help her achieve this. I remember feeling a bit frustrated because it seemed like she was only with him for the popularity that came with it. As for Stan, I couldn't help but feel that he was being used. But it wasn't my place to say anything at the time. Looking back, I wish I could have talked to him about it, but we were young and didn't really know any better. Regardless, it was an interesting time in high school, and one that I can now look back on with some level of detachment. Stan, however, is a great guy. He was team captain, scholar, athlete, took advanced courses in school, and I'm not even kidding when I say he was friends with everyone in that school. During our junior year, most athletes go from playing on the junior varsity squad to the varsity team, and during this time, it was apparent that Liz started to show more interest in Stan. She would flirt with him and spend more time with him in the halls during lunch and before school. Eventually, they started dating, and it was all over Facebook. At first, everyone was happy for them, but my teammates and I could see that Liz was not a good match for Stan. As someone who knew Stan well, I knew that he deserved someone who appreciated him for who he was, and not just because he was popular. While Liz may have been attractive and had a desire to be popular, she didn't seem to share the same values as Stan. It was frustrating to see him in a relationship with someone who seemed to use him for her own benefit. But, as teenagers, we didn't always make the best decisions when it came to relationships, and we learned from our mistakes. Nonetheless, Stan remained an exceptional person who continued to make a positive impact on everyone he met. I have noticed that Liz has a habit of being manipulative. Whenever our team gets together for a gathering, she tends to invite herself without even asking us. Our gatherings usually consist of around 10-15 guys in a house, where we watch Monday Night Football, play video games, and go over our playbook. It's not just the team gatherings that Liz tries to force her way into. If my friend Stan plans to go out anywhere, she tries to tag along with him, even if Stan goes out without her. She constantly sends him text messages, making him feel guilty for not inviting her. This behavior of hers ruins his time, as he has to spend most of his time on the phone calming her down from her tantrums. However, after Stan was dating Liz, and they had been together for about 3 months, when one of our teammates discovered that Liz had created a profile on a dating app. It was concerning for all of us, so we decided to inform Stan about it. Stan was understandably upset and confronted Liz about it. Although she managed to come up with a good enough excuse to pacify Stan, things didn't stay calm for long. About 3 weeks after the incident, Stan caught Liz cheating on him with another guy from a different school. He saw them at a restaurant holding hands over the table while he was picking up dinner for his family. After he dropped the food off at home, he went to Liz's place to find her sitting on top of this guy, making out with him, and with the guy's hands on her chest. Her house had one of those small, angled windows next to the front door, where, when the blinds are up, you can see into the living room from behind the couch. Stan took a photo and left, holding back tears and feeling broken. My teammates and I were livid. We were watching as our friend Stan was getting more and more depressed each day, and how Liz kept screwing with him emotionally, flaunting her new relationship in front of him. This went on for about 5 to 6 weeks, and we couldn't take it anymore. It was time to take action and kick her out of our school. Our state had just passed a law allowing the use of recreational marijuana for people over the age of 21, but the shops weren't open yet. So I contacted my older brother, who had just graduated from college in a town known for its pot culture. I explained the situation to him and gave him some money to get some weed. Our plan was to stash the weed in Liz's locker, then have one of our female friends anonymously report to the school office that Liz was smoking in the bathroom stalls. It was a risky move, but we were desperate to get rid of her. I knew that no one really used their lockers in school, but since Liz and Stan were together, they did the couple thing and shared a locker in the middle of the school. This made it easier for us to carry out our plan without getting caught. We waited until the perfect opportunity presented itself, and then we executed our plan. It was nerve-wracking, but we managed to stash the weed in her locker without anyone noticing. The next day, we heard the news that Liz had been caught with weed in her locker, and she was promptly expelled from the school. We all breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that we had successfully gotten rid of her. Looking back, I realized that what we did was not the best way to handle the situation, but at the time, we felt like we had no other choice. It was a lesson learned, and one that we would never forget. As the weeks went on, it became apparent that Liz had no intention of letting Stan move on from their relationship. She continued to toy with his emotions, causing him to sink deeper into depression. It was heartbreaking to watch our friend go through this, and we knew we had to do something to put an end to it. We were all fed up with Liz's cruel behavior towards Stan, and we decided that it was time to take action. It was clear that we needed to get her out of our school for good. It just so happened that our state had recently passed a law legalizing recreational marijuana for people over 21, but shops weren't open yet. I knew that my older brother, who had just graduated from college in a town known for its pot culture, could help us out. I explained the situation to him and gave him some money to get some weed. Our plan was to stash the marijuana in Liz's locker and then have one of our female friends anonymously report her for smoking in the bathroom stalls. Since Stan and Liz were a couple, they had shared a locker in the middle of the school, and nobody ever really used their locker anyway. We knew that this plan was risky, but we felt that it was necessary to protect our friend from further emotional harm. We all felt that Liz had crossed a line, and we were determined to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. It was time to take a stand and put a stop to her toxic behavior once and for all. Seeing our friend Stan suffer from the emotional turmoil caused by his ex-girlfriend Liz, my teammates and I were furious. For about 5 or 6 weeks, we watched as Liz kept messing with Stan's head, causing him to become increasingly depressed each day. It was unbearable to see him in so much pain. That's when we knew it was time to take action. We decided that Liz needed to leave our school, and we came up with a plan to make it happen. Living in a state that had just legalized recreational marijuana for people over 21, but with no shops open yet, I contacted my older brother, who had just graduated from college in a town known for its pot culture. I explained the situation to him and gave him some money to buy some weed. Our plan was simple. We would stash the weed in Liz's locker and have one of our female friends anonymously report to the school office that Liz was smoking in the bathroom stalls. Since Liz and Stan were a couple, they shared a locker, and we knew we could use this to our advantage. Nobody ever really used their lockers in school, but we figured we could use hers to frame her. However, my friend surprised me by wanting to pitch in and leave a couple of his doctor-prescribed Adderall pills in her locker as well. At the time, we were young and didn't fully understand the serious charges that could come from doing this, but we knew it wasn't legal for Liz to have those pills if she wasn't prescribed them. So, we took the weed and pills and waited for the right moment to strike. One day, after the last class of the day had ended, and Liz was at her locker putting her textbooks away, we distracted her while she was preoccupied. I managed to tuck the goodie bag behind one of her bottom textbooks and shifted the top book against the back of the locker. We made sure to do this during the day when our school had cameras in the hallways, so it would look suspicious if someone who wasn't Liz opened up the locker. Our plan was risky, but we felt it was necessary to help our friend Stan and get rid of someone who was causing him so much pain. As we watched the events unfold, my heart was racing with excitement and a bit of guilt. I couldn't believe what we had just done and the impact it had on Liz's life. But at the same time, I felt like justice had been served for our friend Stan, who had suffered so much because of her. It was a risky move, and we knew the consequences if we got caught, but we were young and foolish. The whole situation taught me a valuable lesson about consequences and the dangers of taking the law into your own hands. Our actions had caused a ripple effect that affected not just Liz, but also her family, and even our school. The incident was talked about for weeks, and it created a sense of paranoia among the students, as we knew that the school would crack down on any further drug-related incidents. Looking back, I wish we had handled the situation differently, and found a way to help Stan through his heartbreak without resorting to illegal means. It wasn't worth it, and it's something I regret to this day. But at the same time, I can't deny the rush of adrenaline that came with the planning and execution of our scheme. It was like we were in our own little action movie, with high stakes and a sense of adventure. In the end, I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is not the easy thing, and that the consequences of our actions can have far-reaching effects. It's a lesson that has stuck with me ever since, and one that I try to apply to all aspects of my life. After Liz got expelled from our school, she didn't take it well. She went on Facebook and made a huge rant about how the school invaded her privacy. She blamed everyone but herself for what had happened. It was pretty clear to us that she was just trying to save face. She didn't want to admit that she messed up and got caught, so she decided to lash out at the school instead. Since Liz was expelled, she had to go to one of the district's remedial high schools. Those schools had stricter teachers and security measures, like metal detectors and pat-downs when you entered. It wasn't the ideal situation for Liz, but it was the consequence of her actions. On the other hand, Stan had a fantastic senior year. He worked hard and graduated with honors. He even won Male Athlete of the Year, which was a huge accomplishment. He applied to his dream college and got accepted, which was a huge relief for him and his family. After graduation, Stan was able to travel with his girlfriend around parts of Asia, which was an amazing experience for them both. He was able to enjoy his time after graduation and pursue his dreams. However, Liz's life took a different turn. She still came to our high school's away football and basketball games, but it was clear that her life was different. During the summer after graduation, Liz revealed on social media that she was 5 months pregnant. It must have been a shock to everyone. We assumed that she got pregnant right before graduation. Now, Liz is dealing with the struggles of being a single parent. She works full-time as a receptionist for a clinic and still lives at home with her parents. It's a tough situation for her, and we feel sorry for her. Update. In regards to the situation with Liz, I want to provide some additional context to explain why I don't believe our revenge was too severe. Our intention was to make her leave the school, and unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. However, it wasn't just because we wanted to get her in trouble. It was because of the zero tolerance policy the school had with drugs and alcohol. If she had been clean, she would have likely only received a citation or a suspension, but not be expelled. But because she failed the drug test, which was not our doing, but her own choice to smoke, she was expelled and had to attend a remedial high school. While she did graduate from that school, she still had the same opportunities as anyone else to attend college. It's worth noting that after turning 18, the juvenile offense was dropped from her record, meaning that it didn't impact her in the long term. She was able to pass a background check and work as a receptionist in a clinic. However, what did impact her ability to attend college was becoming pregnant right after graduation. It's not my fault that she had unprotected S-time and ended up having a child as a result. All I take responsibility for is making her switch schools and having a juvenile record for a few months until it was dropped. While I understand some may view our actions as harsh, I believe the consequences were a direct result of her own choices and actions. In the end, Stan was able to have a successful year and pursue his dream of traveling with his girlfriend, while Liz had to deal with the challenges of being a single parent and working full-time.